Commander Boron spat insults about the primitive humans in his foul alien tongue, not knowing the man before him understood every word. Derek Griffin pursed his lips as the Gamelon's guttural tirade assaulted his ears through the video feed. At only 28, the linguistic prodigy had already secretly mastered the alien language, giving humanity a hidden edge in this tense first contact. But as he looked around the secure UN briefing room at the grim faces of General Masterson and the other world leaders, Derek knew the stakes couldn't be higher. The fierce aliens had arrived without warning, their mothership looming in orbit as they demanded Earth's immediate surrender. Refusal meant invasion and conquest, a war that could bring humanity's extinction. Every attempt to communicate with the hostile Boron had failed, leaving Derek as Earth's last hope. With each passing hour, the pressure mounted. Derek's talent for deciphering alien tongues was needed now more than ever. The fate of the human race rested on his ability to bridge the linguistic gap and open a path to negotiation. If he failed, it could spell the end for human civilization as they knew it. As Commander Boron's diatribe reached a crescendo, Derek stepped forward, taking a deep breath. It was time to reveal humanity's secret weapon and show these arrogant aliens the true depth of human ingenuity. In perfect Gamelon, he began to speak. Derek sat at the conference table, listening intently as General Masterson briefed him on the Gamelon's arrival. The general's voice was grave as he described the alien mothership's imposing presence in Earth's orbit and the Gamelon's non-negotiable demands for surrender. "Their technology is far beyond anything we've ever seen," Masterson said, his eyes locked on Derek. "Our military analysts believe their weapons could easily overpower our defenses if it comes to an armed conflict." Derek nodded, his mind already racing with the implications. He knew that every second counted in this high-stakes situation. Without wasting a moment, he requested access to the audio recordings of Commander Boron's speech. As the files were transferred to his workstation, Derek immersed himself in the alien language. He listened intently, his trained ear picking up on the subtle nuances and patterns in Boron's guttural words. Something about the syntax and structure felt familiar, triggering a memory from his linguistic studies years ago. "There are similarities to an ancient language I've encountered before," Derek said, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I might be able to use that as a starting point to decipher their communication." The world leaders in the room exchanged hopeful glances, their tense postures relaxing slightly at the prospect of progress. Derek worked tirelessly, poring over the recordings and cross-referencing them with his extensive knowledge of languages. Hours ticked by as Derek lost himself in the task, the pressure of the situation driving him forward. The world leaders paced anxiously, their hushed conversations filling the room as they awaited updates on Derek's progress. Meanwhile, on the Gamelon mothership, Commander Boron grew increasingly impatient with Earth's lack of response. His reptilian eyes narrowed as he stared at the view screen, displaying the blue planet below. "These primitive humans dare to keep us waiting," Boron snarled, his clawed hand clenching into a fist. "They need to learn the consequences of defying the Gamelon Empire." With a swift motion, Boron turned to his subordinate and barked an order in their harsh language. Moments later, a beam of energy erupted from the mothership, streaking towards Earth's surface. The blast struck an uninhabited island in the Pacific Ocean, vaporizing it in a blinding flash of light. The destruction was captured by satellites and relayed to the UN briefing room, causing a collective gasp of horror among the world leaders. The reality of the Gamelon's devastating power was now undeniable. "We need to act fast," General Masterson urged, his voice filled with urgency. "If we don't find a way to communicate and negotiate with them, more lives could be lost." Derek felt the weight of responsibility bearing down on him as he redoubled his efforts to crack the Gamelon language. He knew that the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, and failure was not an option. As the hours stretched on, Derek made steady progress, piecing together the alien language bit by bit. The patterns and structures began to make sense, and he could now understand snippets of Boron's recorded speech. But time was running out, and the Gamelon's patience was wearing thin. Derek worked feverishly, driven by the knowledge that every moment he spent deciphering the language brought them one step closer to a diplomatic solution and the survival of the human race. Days turned into nights as Derek worked tirelessly, his eyes glued to the screens displaying the intricate patterns of the Gamelon language. The more he delved into the alien tongue, the more he realized that it was far more complex than he had initially thought. It wasn't just the guttural sounds and harsh consonants that conveyed meaning. Every gesture, every facial expression played a crucial role in communication. Derek's hands flew across the keyboard, his fingers moving with a newfound purpose, as he deciphered the nuances of the Gamelon language. He barely slept, fueled by a combination of adrenaline and the knowledge that the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders. Finally, after several intense days, Derek had a breakthrough. He burst into the briefing room, his eyes wide with excitement. "I've got it," he exclaimed, drawing the attention of the world leaders gathered around the table. "The Gamelon language isn't just spoken. It's a complex system of gestures and facial expressions that convey meaning." Derek pulled up a series of video clips on the large screen, showcasing Boron's movements and expressions as he spoke. "Look here," Derek said, pointing to a specific moment. "When Boron clenches his fist and narrows his eyes, it's a sign of aggression and dominance. But when he tilts his head slightly and softens his gaze, it indicates a willingness to listen." The world leaders leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the screen as Derek continued his explanation. "The Gamelons are a proud warrior race," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "They value strength above all else and view diplomacy as a sign of weakness. If we want to negotiate with them, we need to demonstrate our persistence and capabilities while also showing respect for their culture." General Masterson nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "What do you suggest, Derek?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. Derek took a deep breath, his mind racing with possibilities. "We need to send a message to Boron in his own language," he said, his eyes locked on the general. "We acknowledge their power and technological superiority, but we also assert our purpose to defend ourselves and our planet. We show them that we are not weak, but we are also not a threat to their empire." The world leaders exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from skepticism to cautious optimism. After a brief discussion, they agreed to proceed with Derek's plan. Derek spent the next few hours carefully crafting the message, ensuring that every word, every gesture, and every facial expression was perfect. He practiced the delivery, mimicking Boron's mannerisms and intonation to the best of his ability. When the message was ready, Derek stood before the video camera, his heart pounding in his chest. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his words flowing in the harsh, guttural language of the Gamelons. He conveyed Earth's strength and willpower, acknowledging the Gamelons' power, while also asserting humanity's grit to defend itself. The message was transmitted to the Gamelon mothership, and an eerie silence fell over the briefing room. The world leaders and Derek waited with anxious anticipation, their eyes fixed on the screen, hoping for a response. Minutes ticked by, each second feeling like an eternity. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, the screen flickered to life, and Commander Boron's face appeared. His reptilian features were still fierce, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. "Human," Boron growled, his voice filled with a mix of surprise and grudging respect. "You have managed to communicate in our language. This is unexpected." Derek held his breath, waiting for Boron to continue. The Gamelon commander paused, his gaze intense as he studied Derek through the screen. "Your words, your gestures, they show a level of understanding that we did not anticipate from your primitive species," Boron said, his tone slightly softened. "Perhaps there is more to you humans than meets the eye." Derek felt a glimmer of hope rising in his chest, but he maintained his composure, keeping his expression neutral as he waited for Boron to finish. "We will agree to a meeting with your representatives," Boron declared, his words causing a collective sigh of relief in the briefing room. "But know this, human. The Gamelon Empire does not negotiate out of weakness. We will discuss terms, but we will not hesitate to crush you if you prove unworthy. Derek nodded solemnly, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Understood, Commander Boron," he replied, his words carefully chosen. "We look forward to the opportunity to engage in diplomatic discussions with the Gamilon Empire." As the screen went blank, the briefing room erupted in a mix of cheers and nervous chatter. Derek felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see General Masterson standing beside him, a look of pride on his face. "You did it, Derek," the general said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You've given us a chance to avoid a catastrophic war and find a peaceful solution." Derek nodded, his mind already racing with the challenges that lay ahead. He knew that the meeting with the Gamilons would be a delicate dance, a test of his linguistic skills and diplomatic prowess. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of relief, knowing that his hard work had paid off and that humanity had taken its first step towards a new era of interstellar relations. As the world leaders deliberated on the next steps, it became clear that Derek's presence would be essential in the upcoming meeting with the Gamilons. His unique ability to understand and communicate in their language made him an invaluable asset. General Masterson pulled Derek aside, his face etched with concern. "Derek, we need you to accompany the Earth delegation to the Gamilon mothership," the general said, his voice low and urgent. "Your linguistic skills will be crucial in navigating the negotiations." Derek nodded, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and apprehension. He knew the weight of the responsibility he was being entrusted with. The fate of Earth and its people rested on the success of this meeting. As the delegation prepared to board the alien vessel, a team of technicians fitted Derek with a concealed earpiece. The device, a marvel of human ingenuity, would allow him to listen in on the Gamilons' conversations and provide real-time translations to the Earth representatives. The journey to the Gamilon mothership was a surreal experience. The sleek angular craft dwarfed the human shuttle, its advanced technology evident in every aspect of its design. Derek's eyes widened as they entered the hangar bay, taking in the rows of menacing fighter ships and the bustling activity of Gamilon soldiers. The Earth delegation was escorted through the mothership's corridors, their footsteps echoing on the metallic floors. Derek couldn't help but marvel at the advanced technology surrounding them, from the holographic displays to the energy weapons carried by the Gamilon guards. As they entered the meeting chamber, Derek's gaze was immediately drawn to Commander Boron. The imposing Gamilon leader sat at the head of a long table, his reptilian features even more intimidating in person. Boron's eyes narrowed as the Earth delegation took their seats, his posture radiating an air of superiority. The meeting began, and Boron wasted no time in making his demands. He spoke in his native language, his words harsh and unyielding. The Earth representatives sat in silence, their faces tense as they waited for Derek's translation. Through the concealed earpiece, Derek listened intently to Boron's speech. He quickly realized that the Gamilon commander was making not only demands, but also thinly veiled threats. Boron spoke of the Gamilon Empire's might, hinting at the consequences should Earth refuse to comply. Derek relayed the translation to the Earth delegation, his voice steady and calm despite the gravity of the situation. Armed with the knowledge of Boron's true intentions, the Earth representatives responded with carefully chosen words, asserting their own strength and tenacity. As the negotiations progressed, Derek picked up on subtle nuances in Boron's language that revealed a deeper motive behind the Gamilon's actions. It became clear that they were not only interested in conquering Earth, but also in acquiring its resources and technology. Derek discreetly conveyed this information to the Earth delegation, who quickly adapted their strategy. They used the knowledge to their advantage, highlighting the potential benefits of a peaceful collaboration rather than a forceful takeover. The meeting stretched on for hours, with Derek serving as the critical link between the two sides. His linguistic skills and keen observations proved invaluable in navigating the delicate dance of diplomacy. Finally, After intense discussions and carefully crafted compromises, the meeting concluded with a temporary truce. The Earth delegation and the Gamilons agreed to further talks, with the promise of finding a mutually beneficial solution. As they left the mothership, Derek couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had taken the first step towards averting a catastrophic war. However, he knew that the real battle had just begun. The negotiations had revealed the Gamilons' true intentions, and Earth would need to be prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. Derek glanced at the Earth representatives, their faces a mix of relief and drive. They had bought themselves some time, but the future was still uncertain. The linguistic prodigy knew that his skills would be more crucial than ever in the days to come. As the human shuttle departed from the Gamilon mothership, Derek's mind raced with the implications of the meeting. He had glimpsed the true nature of the Gamilons, and he knew that Earth would need to be vigilant. The temporary truce was just the beginning, and Derek was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Back on Earth, Derek immersed himself in the study of Gamilon culture. Poring over ancient texts and digital archives, he spent long hours in the UN's Secure Language Lab, his eyes glued to the screens as he absorbed every detail of the alien civilization. One late night, as fatigue crept in, Derek stumbled upon a fascinating legend buried deep within the Gamilon historical records. The story told of a mythical warrior named Zorgon, who united warring factions on ancient Gamilon through a display of strength and wisdom. Zorgon challenged the leaders of each faction to a series of trials proving his valor and intellect. In the end, the factions laid down their arms and pledged allegiance to Zorgon, ushering in an era of peace and prosperity. Derek leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. If he could embody the spirit of Zorgon, perhaps he could earn the respect of the Gamilons and negotiate a lasting peace between their worlds. He knew it was a long shot, but with tensions rising and time running out, he was willing to try anything. Derek threw himself into his new mission with a fierce intensity. He trained tirelessly in the Gamilon martial art of Kanar, his body aching as he pushed himself to master the alien fighting techniques. He studied Gamilon customs and etiquette, memorizing every nuance of their complex social hierarchy. As Derek prepared, the situation in Earth's orbit grew increasingly volatile. The Gamilon mothership loomed menacingly, its weapons systems primed and ready. Boron's patience was wearing thin, and he began staging military exercises dangerously close to Earth's defensive perimeter. Reports of skirmishes between Gamilon scouts and Earth's defense forces trickled in, each incident ratcheting up the tension. The world leaders bombarded Derek with demands for a solution, their voices filled with desperation. In a secure video conference, General Masterson's face filled the screen, his expression grave. "Derek, we're running out of time," he said, his voice strained. "The Gamilons are growing more aggressive by the day. We need a breakthrough, and we need it now." Derek nodded, his eyes hardened. He knew what he had to do. "I have a plan," he said, his voice steady. "But it's risky. I need to confront Boron directly, challenge him to a duel according to Gamilon tradition." The general's eyes widened. "A duel? Are you sure that's wise?" "It's the only way," Derek replied, his gaze unwavering. "In Gamilon culture, a duel is a sacred test of strength and honor. If I can prove myself to Boron, earn his respect, it could open the door to real negotiations." Masterson hesitated, weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded. "All right, Derek, you have my support, but be careful. The fate of Earth rests on your shoulders." Derek wasted no time. He crafted a message to Boron in perfect Gamilon, each word chosen with precision. He invoked the name of Zorgon, the legendary warrior, and issued his challenge. "Commander Boron," Derek spoke into the camera, his voice ringing with authority. "I, Derek of Earth, invoke the sacred right of Kanartok. I challenge you to a duel of strength and wisdom, as the great Zorgon did in days of old. Let us settle this conflict as true warriors, with honor and respect." He sent the message, his heart pounding in his chest. Hours crawled by, the tension in the UN compound growing thicker with each passing minute. Finally, a response came. Boron's face filled the screen, his reptilian features contorted in a mix of surprise and intrigue. "Derek of Earth," Boron growled, his voice rumbling like distant thunder, "you have invoked the name of Zorgon and challenged me to Kanartok. This is unexpected." The Gamilon commander paused, his eyes narrowing. "I accept your challenge, human. We shall meet on the field of battle and test your mettle. Prepare yourself, for the fate of your world hangs in the balance." As the screen went dark, Derek felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. The die was cast and the stage was set for a showdown that would determine the future of two worlds. He knew the odds were stacked against him, but he was ready to fight, ready to do whatever it took to save his planet and his people. In the days that followed, Derek trained harder than ever, pushing his body and mind to their limits. He sparred with holographic Gamilon warriors, honing his skills in the alien martial art. He studied every scrap of information on Gamilon culture, searching for any advantage he could find. As the appointed day drew near, Derek stood before the mirror in his quarters, his eyes fixed on his reflection. He wore the traditional armor of a Gamilon warrior, the sleek black plates gleaming in the dim light. His face was etched with tenacity, a fire burning in his eyes. He knew that the fate of Earth rested on his shoulders, that the lives of billions hung in the balance. But he also knew that he had the strength, the knowledge, and the willpower to face this challenge head-on. With a final deep breath, Derek strode out of his quarters, ready to meet his destiny. The future of two worlds would be decided on the field of battle, and he would give everything he had to ensure that peace prevailed. As the day of the duel approached, Derek trained harder than ever in the secure UN facility. Sweat poured down his face as he practiced the intricate Gamilon fighting techniques, his muscles burning with each precise movement. A soft knock on the door interrupted his focus. Derek turned to see an elderly Gamilon male enter the room, his reptilian features etched with age and wisdom. The elder introduced himself as Zorax, a member of a secret faction within the Gamilon leadership that sought peace with Earth. "I have been watching you, Derek of Earth," Zorax said, his voice raspy but kind. "Your mastery of our language and your dedication to understanding our ways have not gone unnoticed." Derek bowed his head in respect, surprised by the elder's presence. "I am honored, Zorax, but why have you come?" Zorax stepped closer, his eyes intense. "I am here to offer my assistance. Boron is a formidable warrior, and he will not hesitate to exploit any weakness. But I can teach you advanced combat techniques that will give you an edge in battle." Derek's heart raced at the opportunity. He knew that any advantage could mean the difference between victory and defeat. "I am grateful for your offer, Zorax. I accept your training with humility and perseverance." Over the next few days, Zorax put Derek through a grueling regimen of physical and mental conditioning. They sparred for hours on end, the clang of Gamilon energy swords echoing through the training room. Zorax shared his knowledge of Boron's fighting style, pointing out the commander's strengths and weaknesses. "Boron is arrogant," Zorax warned, his voice low. "He believes himself to be invincible. Use that against him. Unsettle his mind, and his body will follow." Derek nodded, committing every piece of advice to memory. He pushed himself harder than he ever had before, driven by the knowledge that the fate of Earth rested on his shoulders. Finally, the day of the duel arrived. Derek stood on the neutral planet, a barren world chosen for its impartiality. The earthen sky stretched out above him, a reminder of the home he fought to protect. Derek was clad in traditional Gamilon armor, the sleek black plates molded to his body like a second skin. In his hand, he gripped a Gamilon energy sword, its blade humming with power. Across the dusty arena stood Boron, his reptilian features twisted into a sneer. The Gamilon commander was adorned in his own battle armor, his eyes glinting with malice. "So the human has come to face me," Boron taunted, his voice dripping with disdain. "You are foolish to think you can defeat me, Derek of Earth. Your kind is weak and inferior." Derek remained silent, his gaze locked on Boron. He remembered Zorax's words, knowing that he must not let the commander's taunts unsettle him. With a roar, Boron charged forward, his energy sword slashing through the air. Derek met him head-on, their blades clashing in a burst of sparks. The two warriors fought with a fierce intensity, their movements a blur of speed and precision. Derek surprised Boron with his mastery of Gamilon fighting techniques, parrying the commander's strikes and launching his own counterattacks. As the battle raged on, Derek began to gain the upper hand. He used his knowledge of Gamilon language and culture to unsettle Boron, taunting him in his own tongue and exploiting the weaknesses Zorax had revealed. Boron's face contorted with rage and frustration as he realized that Derek was outmaneuvering him. The Gamilon commander's strikes became more erratic, his form slipping as anger clouded his judgment. In a sudden move, Derek saw an opening. He feinted to the left, drawing Boron's blade out of position, then struck with lightning speed. His energy sword sliced through Boron's defenses, sending the commander's weapon flying from his grasp. Boron stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. Derek stood over him, his blade poised at the commander's throat. The Gamilon representatives watched in stunned silence, while the Earth delegation held their breath. But instead of striking the final blow, Derek lowered his sword. He looked down at Boron, his voice steady and clear. "Yield, Boron," Derek said, his words ringing out across the arena. "I offer you a chance for peace, a chance to end this conflict without further bloodshed." Boron's face twisted with humiliation and rage, but as he looked into Derek's eyes, he saw a strength and honor that he could not deny. Slowly, grudgingly, the Gamilon commander bowed his head. "I yield," Boron growled, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "You have bested me, Derek of Earth. I will hear your terms for peace." A collective gasp rippled through the gathered representatives. The impossible had happened. A human had defeated a Gamilon commander in single combat, earning the right to negotiate a truce. As Derek helped Boron to his feet, he felt a surge of hope. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but with this victory, he had taken the first step towards a lasting peace between their worlds. In the wake of Derek's stunning victory over Boron, the Gamilon commander begrudgingly agreed to begin peace negotiations with Earth. The two sides met on neutral ground, a small, uninhabited planet halfway between Earth and the Gamilon Empire. Derek and Boron sat across from each other at a simple metal table, their respective delegations flanking them. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a glimmer of hope in the air. Derek, ever the diplomat, began the talks by acknowledging the strength and pride of the Gamilon people. "Commander Boron," he said, his voice steady and respectful, "I come to you not as a conqueror, but as an equal. Our peoples have much to learn from each other, and I believe that through open dialogue and mutual understanding, we can forge a lasting peace." Boron leaned back in his chair, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "You speak well, Derek of Earth," he growled, "but words are easy. How can I trust that your people will honor any agreement we reach?" Derek met Boron's gaze unflinchingly. "Trust must be earned, Commander. I propose that we start small with a simple exchange of cultural ambassadors. Let our people learn about each other, and let trust grow from understanding." As the negotiations progressed, Derek and Boron found themselves drawn into a grudging respect for one another. They traded stories of their respective cultures, their hopes and fears for the future. In time, they began to see each other not as enemies, but as potential allies. However, not everyone was pleased with the progress of the peace talks. In the shadows of the Gamilon mothership, a group of hardline military leaders met in secret. They were led by General Zadok, a grizzled veteran who saw the peace negotiations as a betrayal of the Gamilon warrior spirit. "Boron has gone soft," Zadok snarled, his clawed fists clenched in anger. "He has forgotten what it means to be Gamilon. We are a proud people, born to conquer and rule. This alliance with the humans is a disgrace." The other officers nodded in agreement, their faces twisted with disgust. "What do you propose, General?" one of them asked, his voice low and conspiratorial. Zadok leaned forward, his eyes glinting with malice. "We must remove Boron and the human," he hissed, "by any means necessary. Once they are gone, we can crush the humans and claim their world for the Gamelon Empire." Back at the Peace Summit, Derek and Boron were deep in discussion about the potential for trade between their worlds. Earth had advanced medical technology that could greatly benefit the Gamelon people, while the Gamelons had access to rare minerals and materials that could revolutionize Earth's industry. "I believe this could be the beginning of a new era of prosperity for both our peoples," Derek said, a smile spreading across his face. "Imagine what we could achieve together, as allies instead of enemies." Boron nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "You may be right, Derek of Earth. Perhaps it is time for the Gamelon Empire to seek a new path, one of cooperation instead of conquest." Just as they were on the verge of a breakthrough, the sound of explosions rocked the summit chamber. Derek and Boron leapt to their feet, their eyes wide with shock and alarm. "What's happening?" Derek shouted over the chaos, his hand instinctively reaching for his energy sword. Boron's face contorted with rage as he realized what was happening. "Zardoc," he snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. "That traitorous dog has staged a coup." The doors to the chamber burst open, revealing a squad of heavily armed Gamelon soldiers. At their head was General Zardoc, his eyes blazing with hatred. "Boron," he roared, his voice booming across the room, "you have betrayed our people, our very way of life. I am relieving you of command, and I will deal with this human filth myself." Derek and Boron exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They drew their weapons and stood back to back, ready to face the onslaught together. "So much for peace," Derek muttered, a grim smile on his face. Boron chuckled darkly. "Peace is overrated, human. Now let us show these traitors the true meaning of Gamelon honor." With a roar, the two unlikely allies charged forward, their energy swords flashing in the dim light. They fought side by side, Gamelon and human, against the rebels who sought to destroy everything they had worked so hard to build. The battle was fierce and bloody, but Derek and Boron's combined skill and purpose proved too much for the rebels. They cut a swath through the enemy ranks, their movements perfectly synchronized, as if they had been fighting together for years. Finally, they stood before General Zardoc, his once proud form battered and bleeding. The traitorous general glared at them with hatred, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "You may have won this battle," he spat, his voice thick with venom. "But the war is far from finished. The Gamelon people will never accept this alliance with the humans. You are both traitors to your own kind." Derek stepped forward, his voice calm and steady. "No, General. It is you who are the traitor. You would lead your people into a war they cannot win, all for the sake of your own pride and ambition. Commander Boron and I have seen a better way, a path of peace and cooperation, and we will fight to make that vision a reality, at any expense." With a final defiant roar, Zardoc lunged at Derek, his energy sword flashing in a desperate attack. But Boron was there, his own blade intercepting the blow and driving it aside. With a swift, precise strike, the Gamelon commander ended the general's treachery once and for all. As the smoke cleared and the rebels lay defeated, Derek and Boron stood tall, their armor battered but their spirits unbroken. They knew that the road ahead would be nearly impossible, that there would be many challenges and obstacles to overcome. But they also knew that they had forged an unbreakable bond, a friendship that would stand the test of time. Together they would build a new future, one of peace and prosperity for both their peoples, and they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, side by side, as allies and as friends. Derek and Boron crept through the dimly lit corridors of the Gamelon mothership, their footsteps muffled by the soft hum of the ship's engines. They moved with a practiced efficiency, their minds perfectly in sync as they navigated the labyrinthine passageways. Boron held up a clawed hand, signaling for Derek to stop. The Gamelon commander's keen senses had picked up the sound of approaching footsteps. They pressed themselves against the wall, blending into the shadows as a patrol of Zardoc's elite guards marched past. Once the coast was clear, they resumed their silent advance towards the command center. Derek's heart raced with anticipation, knowing that every second counted. If they couldn't stop Zardok's plan, both Earth and the Gamelon Empire would be plunged into a devastating war. As they neared the command center, the sound of raised voices echoed through the corridor. Derek and Boron exchanged a glance, their suspicions confirmed. They crept closer, straining to hear the conversation. "The Emperor will do as I command," Zardok's voice boomed, dripping with arrogance. "He will declare war on Earth, and the Gamelon people will rally behind me. With our superior technology and the element of surprise, we will crush the humans and claim their world for ourselves." Derek's blood ran cold at the revelation. Zardok was planning to use the Emperor as a puppet, manipulating him into declaring a war that would benefit only Zardok's own ambitions. Boron's eyes narrowed, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "We must act quickly," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "If Zardok succeeds, it will mean the end of everything we have worked for." Derek nodded, his mind racing as he formulated a plan. "We need to expose Zardok's treachery to the Gamelon people," he said, his voice low and urgent. "If we can broadcast the truth to the entire fleet, we can turn them against him." Boron's eyes widened in understanding. "The communication system," he said, a glimmer of hope in his voice. "If we can hack into it, we can send a message to every ship in the fleet." Derek grinned, a spark of dedication flashing in his eyes. "And I know just the message to send." They quickly outlined their plan, each of them taking on a specific role. Boron would create a diversion, drawing Zardok and his guards away from the command center, while Derek would hack into the communication system and broadcast the exposé. As they prepared to put their plan into action, the Gamelon elder emerged from the shadows, his aged features etched with persistence. In his hands, he held a data drive, its surface gleaming in the dim light. "I have gathered evidence of Zardok's crimes," the elder said, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. "Recordings of his secret meetings, his plans to overthrow the Emperor and seize power for himself. Use this to show the truth to our people." Derek took the data drive, a sense of gratitude and respect welling up inside him. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Your bravery will not be forgotten." With a final nod, the elder melted back into the shadows, his role in the plan complete. Derek and Boron split up, each of them moving towards their designated targets. Boron made his way to the armory, where he knew Zardok's guards would be stationed. With a few well-placed charges, he set off a series of explosions, the blasts rocking the ship and sending alarms blaring throughout the corridors. As the guards rushed to investigate the disturbance, Derek slipped into the command center, his heart pounding in his chest. He quickly located the communication console and set to work, his fingers flying over the controls as he hacked into the system. Within seconds, he had gained access to the fleet-wide broadcast channel. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. "Attention, all Gamelon warriors," Derek began, his voice ringing out over the speakers. "This is Derek of Earth, and I bring you a message of grave importance." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Zardok, the one who claims to be your leader, is a traitor to the Gamelon Empire. He has manipulated and lied to you, using your loyalty and honor for his own selfish gain." With a few taps on the console, Derek uploaded the evidence provided by the elder. Recordings of Zardok's secret meetings and plans filled the screens of every ship in the fleet. "Zardok plans to use the Emperor as a puppet, forcing him to declare war on Earth," Derek continued, his voice filled with conviction. "He seeks to plunge our worlds into a devastating conflict, all for the sake of his own power and ambition." As the evidence played out, the Gamelon warriors on the ships began to murmur, their eyes widening in shock and disbelief. They had trusted Zardok, followed him without question, but now the truth was laid bare before them. "But you, the warriors of the Gamelon Empire, are not mere pawns to be used and discarded," Derek said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "You are proud and honorable, bound by a code of loyalty and duty. Zardok has betrayed that code, and in doing so he has betrayed each and every one of you." The murmurs grew louder, the warriors' voices rising in anger and indignation. They had been deceived, their honor tarnished by Zadok's actions. In the command center, Zadok's face contorted with rage as he realized his plan was unraveling before his eyes. He spun around, his gaze falling on Derek, who stood defiantly at the communication console. "You," Zadok snarled, his voice dripping with venom, "you have ruined everything." He lunged at Derek, his clawed hands outstretched, ready to tear the human apart. But Derek was ready, his training with Boron and the Elder paying off as he dodged the attack and countered with a swift strike of his own. The two of them fought, trading blows and grappling for control. Around them, the command center erupted into chaos as Boron and the loyal Gamilon warriors stormed in, engaging Zadok's elite guards in a fierce battle. Derek and Zadok circled each other, their eyes locked in a deadly stare. Zadok's once pristine armor was battered and dented, his face twisted with madness and desperation. "You think you've won, human?" Zadok spat, his voice ragged with exertion. "You think you can defeat me?" Derek smiled, a steadfast perseverance etched on his features. "I don't think, Zadok, I know." With a final, devastating blow, Derek sent Zadok crashing to the floor, the traitor's body still and unmoving. Around them the battle raged on, but Derek knew that the tide had turned. The Gamilon warriors, once loyal to Zadok, now fought against his elite guards, their eyes opened to the truth of their leader's betrayal. As the dust settled and the last of Zadok's guards were subdued, Derek and Boron stood side by side, their armor battered but their spirits unbroken. They had done it against impossible odds. They had exposed Zadok's treachery and prevented a catastrophic war between their worlds. But even as they savored their victory, they knew that the road ahead would be lengthy and challenging. There was much work to be done, bridges to be built, and trust to be restored. But with the power of their unlikely alliance and the strength of their shared convictions, they knew that anything was possible. The Emperor, freed from Zadok's clutches, stepped forward, his eyes filled with gratitude and respect. "Derek of Earth, Boron of the Gamilon Empire," he said, his voice ringing out across the command center, "you have shown us the true meaning of honor and loyalty. You have saved us from ourselves, and for that, we owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Derek and Boron bowed their heads, humbled by the Emperor's words. They knew that this was only the beginning, but it was a beginning filled with hope and promise. As they looked out across the stars, the endless expanse of the universe stretching out before them, they knew that they had taken the first step towards a new era of peace and understanding, an era where humans and Gamilons would stand together, united in their pursuit of a brighter future for all. Derek and Boron stood back to back, energy swords humming, as Zadok's elite guards circled them like predators stalking prey. The command center had become a battlefield, the once pristine consoles and screens now scarred by blaster fire and sparking with damaged circuitry. Zadok laughed, a cruel, grating sound that echoed through the chamber. "You fools," he spat, his eyes glinting with madness. "You think you can defeat me? I have already won." Derek gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on his sword. "It's over, Zadok," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Your treachery has been exposed. The Gamilon people will never follow you now." Zadok's face twisted into a sneer. "The Gamilon people are weak," he snarled. "They need a strong leader, someone who will lead them to glory and conquest." Boron growled, his reptilian features contorted with rage. "You are no leader, Zadok. You are a traitor and a coward." The rogue general's eyes flashed with anger, and he lunged forward, his own energy sword slashing through the air. Derek and Boron met him head-on, their blades clashing in a burst of sparks and sizzling energy. The elite guards joined the fray, their weapons firing in a deadly barrage. Derek and Boron wove through the onslaught, their movements perfectly synchronized as they deflected blaster bolts and struck down their enemies. As the battle raged, Zadok's voice rose above the din, a manic edge to his words. "You have no idea what you're up against," he cried, his sword locked with Derek's. I have seen the truth, the real power behind the scenes. Derek's eyes narrowed, a sense of unease creeping up his spine. What are you talking about? Zardoc laughed again, a sound that chilled Derek to the bone. The Gamilons, the humans, all the races of the galaxy, we are merely pawns in a much larger game. He leaned in closer, his breath hot on Derek's face. There is a force out there, a race so ancient and powerful that they make the Gamilon Empire look like children playing at war. They have been manipulating us for centuries, pulling the strings from the shadows. Derek's blood ran cold, his pupils dilating with the implications of Zardoc's words. Why are you telling me this? Zardoc grinned, a twisted, maniacal expression. Because I have allied myself with them, he said, his voice filled with a perverse pride. They have promised me power beyond my wildest dreams, the chance to rule not just the Gamilon Empire, but the entire galaxy. Boron roared in fury, his sword slicing through the air and decapitating one of the elite guards. You would betray your own people? Sell us out to these manipulators? Zardoc shrugged, a casual gesture that belied the gravity of his words. The Gamilon Empire is just a means to an end, he said. With my new allies, I will become a god. Derek and Boron exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. They knew they had to end this here and now, before Zardoc's madness could spread any further. With a burst of speed, they launched themselves at the rogue general, their swords flashing in a deadly dance. Zardoc fought back with the strength of a cornered animal, his blade a blur of motion as he parried and struck. But Derek and Boron's combined skill and persistence proved too much. They pressed their advantage, driving Zardoc back, their swords finding gaps in his defense and scoring hits on his armor. As the battle reached its climax, Zardoc stumbled, his sword arm severed at the elbow by a precise strike from Derek's blade. The rogue general fell to his knees, his face a mask of shock and pain. Derek stood over him, his sword poised for the killing blow. But before he could strike, Zardoc's other hand shot out, his fingers closing around a small device on his belt. You may have defeated me, Zardoc hissed, his voice filled with venom, but my masters will avenge me. They will come for you and for all the races of the galaxy. With a final defiant laugh, Zardoc activated the device. A pulse of energy burst from it, a signal that raced out into the depths of space, carrying a message of distress and summons. Derek and Boron could only watch in horror as the device flared and then went dead, its purpose fulfilled. They had won the battle, but they knew that the war was a long way to go. As the last of the elite guards fell and the command center grew still, Derek and Boron turned to each other, their faces grim. We have to find out more about this mysterious race, Derek said, his mind already racing with possibilities. If Zardoc was telling the truth, then the galaxy is in even greater danger than we realized. Boron nodded, his expression thoughtful. We will need allies, he said, other races and factions who can help us uncover the truth and fight against this threat. Derek's eyes glinted with perseverance. Then let's get to work, he said, his voice filled with a newfound sense of purpose. We have a galaxy to save. In the wake of Zardoc's stunning revelation and the activation of the mysterious distress signal, Derek and Boron knew they had no time to waste. The galaxy was in grave danger, and they were the only ones who could unravel the web of deceit that threatened to engulf everything they held dear. With a newfound sense of urgency, Derek and Boron set out on a perilous journey to gather allies and uncover the secrets of the enigmatic race known as the Voidbringers. They traveled to distant worlds, each more bizarre and treacherous than the last, seeking out those who might stand with them against the coming darkness. On the planet Xanthus, a world of perpetual twilight and eerie bioluminescent forests, they encountered the Zephyrians, a race of winged humanoids with a deep connection to the mystical energies that permeated the universe. Derek's mastery of their lyrical language allowed him to navigate the complex social hierarchy and forge a tentative alliance with the Zephyrian elders. The Voidbringers have long been a whispered legend among our people, the eldest Zephyrian said, her voice a haunting melody, a force of pure chaos, consuming all in their path. If what you say is true, then we cannot stand idly by. As they journeyed on, Derek and Boron faced numerous challenges, from the savage warbands of the Kragnak wastes to the mind-bending illusions of the phantasmal nebula. Each trial tested their perseverance and their bond, forging them into a team that could face even the darkest of threats. Piece by piece, they assembled a coalition of the willing, a ragtag group of warriors, scholars, and outcasts united by a common cause. Derek's linguistic skills proved invaluable, allowing him to bridge the gaps between disparate cultures and ideologies, finding common ground where none seemed to exist. But even as their alliance grew, so too did the scope of the Voidbringers' machinations. Ancient ruins and forgotten archives revealed a chilling truth. The Voidbringers had been manipulating galactic events for millennia, orchestrating conflicts and harvesting the resulting chaos energy to fuel their own dark purposes. "For they feed on discord and strife," Boron said, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries. "Every war, every act of violence, only makes them stronger. We must find a way to break the cycle, to starve them of their sustenance." It was then that they uncovered the prophecy, a fragmentary text that spoke of a human Gamelon alliance that would bring balance to the galaxy and defeat the Voidbringers. The words were a beacon of hope, but also a grim warning of the sacrifices that would be required. "Two worlds, two warriors, bound by fate," Derek read, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Only together can they hope to stand against the coming darkness, but the price will be high." As the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Derek and Boron knew that the time had come to confront the Voidbringers on their own turf. They gathered their allies, a motley fleet of starships and warriors from a dozen worlds, and set course for the heart of the Voidbringer domain. The journey was harrowing, a nightmare of twisted space and mind-bending horrors. Reality itself seemed to warp and distort as they drew closer to their destination, the laws of physics becoming little more than suggestions in the face of the Voidbringer's power. But at last, they arrived at the Voidbringer homeworld, a blasted hellscape of jagged obsidian spires and pulsing veins of sickly purple energy. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the crackle of barely contained chaos, and even the bravest among them felt their purpose waver in the face of such malevolence. The battle was joined, a cacophony of energy weapons and eldritch blasts that lit up the tortured sky. Derek and Boron fought side by side, their moves perfectly synchronized as they carved a path through the Voidbringer horde. Around them, their allies fought with equal ferocity, each bringing their own unique skills and abilities to bear against the nightmarish foe. But even with all their strength and courage, it soon became clear that the Voidbringers were simply too powerful. Their numbers seemed endless, and for every one that fell, two more rose to take its place. The alliance began to falter, their lines buckling under the relentless onslaught. In a moment of desperate clarity, Derek and Boron exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They knew what had to be done, the sacrifice that the prophecy had foretold. Together they fought their way to the center of the Voidbringer lines, to the towering monstrosity that could only be their leader. The creature was a horror beyond imagining, a writhing mass of tentacles and gnashing maws, its very presence enough to drive lesser minds to madness. But Derek and Boron did not falter, drawing upon the depths of their bond and the power of their combined will. With a roar of defiance, they unleashed a devastating attack, a fusion of human ingenuity and Gamelon might that tore through the Voidbringer leader's defenses and struck at its very core. The creature howled in agony, its form beginning to unravel as the chaos energy that sustained it was ripped away. But the attack had come at a terrible cost. Boron staggered, a gaping wound in his side leaking viscous green blood. He fell to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he struggled to hold on to life. Derek was at his side in an instant, cradling his friend's head in his lap. Tears streamed down his face as he realized the magnitude of Boron's sacrifice, the price that had been paid for their victory. "Go," Boron whispered, his voice a rattling hiss. "Finish it. Don't let my death be in vain." Derek nodded, his heart breaking even as he steeled himself for what had to be done. He rose to his feet, his eyes locked on the writhing form of the Voidbringer leader. With a final cry of rage and sorrow, he charged forward, his blade flashing in the sickly light. The blow struck true, piercing the heart of the abomination. The Voidbringer leader convulsed, its form dissolving into a maelstrom of chaotic energy that whipped and howled like a living thing. Derek held on with all his strength, pouring every ounce of his will into the strike, until at last the creature was no more. As the Voidbringer leader fell, the rest of its kind began to wither and die, their power broken by the loss of their master. The Alliance stood victorious, but the price had been high. Boron lay still and silent, his life given in defense of the galaxy he had sworn to protect. In the aftermath of the battle, Derek knelt beside his fallen friend, his heart heavy with grief and loss. Around him the survivors of the Alliance gathered, their faces etched with the same sorrow and exhaustion. "He was a true warrior," one of the Zephyrians said, her voice a mournful song, "a hero to the end." Derek nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He knew that Boron's sacrifice would never be forgotten, that his name would be spoken with reverence and honor for generations to come. But even in his grief, Derek knew that there was still work to be done. The Voidbringers had been defeated, but the galaxy was in chaos, the scars of their machinations running deep. It would take time and effort to heal the wounds, to bring the disparate races and factions together in a new era of peace and cooperation. As the Alliance began the long process of rebuilding, Derek returned to Earth, a hero welcomed with parades and accolades. But he was a changed man, haunted by the weight of Boron's death and the knowledge of the horrors he had witnessed. In the years that followed, Derek dedicated himself to the cause of unity, working tirelessly to foster understanding and cooperation between humans and aliens alike. He became a diplomat, a negotiator, a bridge between worlds, using his unique talents to bring people together in the face of adversity. And though the galaxy would never be the same, Derek knew that there was still hope. For as long as there were those willing to stand against the darkness, to fight for what was right, there would always be a chance for a better tomorrow. The story ends with Derek, now a seasoned diplomat standing on the bridge of a sleek starship, ready to embark on a new mission to a distant corner of the galaxy. His eyes are filled with a quiet willpower, a commitment born of the trials he has faced and the sacrifices he has witnessed. For he knows that the universe is a vast and wondrous place, filled with both danger and opportunity, and he is ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead, armed with the knowledge that even in the darkest of times, there is always the potential for light to shine through. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.